Today I will be analyzing Fort Mose Historic State Park, located in St. Augustine, Florida. This landmark represents an important part of early African American history, especially during the time of the transatlantic slave trade and the early resistance to slavery. Fort Mose is significant because it was the first legally recognized free black settlement in what is now the United States. Fort Mose was established in 1738 by the Spanish, who offered freedom to enslaved Africans escaping from British colonies like South Carolina in order to gain their freedom. These individuals had to convert to Catholicism and agreed to help defend Spanish Florida. This shows how European powers used slavery and freedom as tools in their conflicts, but it also created opportunities for enslaved people to resist and escape. One important connection to early America is the transatlantic slave trade. Many of the people who lived at Fort Mose were originally brought in the Americas through this system. They came from different parts of Africa, bringing with them languages, traditions, and cultural practices. Even after being enslaved, they were able to keep elements of their African identity alive, which is something we discussed in class when learning about African cultural retention. Fort Mose is also a strong example of resistance. Instead of accepting slavery, these individuals escaped and built their own community. They worked together, formed a militia, and defended their settlement from attacks. This shows that enslaved Africans were not passive victims, but active participants in their own fight to freedom. Another important point is that the blending of cultures at Fort Mose, African traditions mixed with Spanish and Native American influences. This created a unique cultural environment that reflected adaptation and survival. It connects to the idea that African culture did not disappear during slavery, but instead evolved and influenced American society. In conclusion, Fort Mose is an important historical landmark because it represents freedom, resistance, and cultural survival. It helps us understand that even in the early Americas, enslaved Africans were actively shaping history and fighting for their rights. Our next landmark is the Boone Hall Plantation. Today I will be analyzing Boone Hall Plantation, a historic site located in South Carolina that represents plantation life during the period of slavery between 700 and 1850. Boone Hall is one of the oldest working plantations in the United States, and it provides an important look into how enslaved Africans lived and worked during this time. Boone Hall Plantation became known for producing cotton, which was one of the most important cash crops in the Southern economy. Cotton production depended heavily on enslaved labor. Enslaved Africans were forced to work long hours in the field, often from sunrise to sunset, planting, picking, and processing cotton. This work was physically exhausting and required constant effort under strict supervision. One of the most important features of the Boone Hall is the preserved slave cabins. These cabins help us understand the living conditions of enslaved people. Families live in small, crowded spaces with very limited resources. Despite these harsh conditions, enslaved people created communities, supported each other, and maintained strong family connections. Another key aspect of Boone Hall Plantation is its connection to Gullah culture. The Gullah people are descendants of enslaved Africans who preserve many elements of their African heritage, including language, food, and tradition. This shows that even under oppression, African Americans were able to maintain their identity and cultural roots. Boone Hall Plantation also helps us understand how the Southern economy depended on slavery. Plantation owners became wealthy through labor of the enslaved people, showing how deeply connected slavery was to economic success at the time. In conclusion, Boone Hall Plantation is a significant historical landmark because it reveals both the harsh realities of slavery and the resilience of enslaved Africans. It helps us better understand plantation life and the lasting impact of slavery on American history. Fort Sumter National Monument as our next landmark. Today I will be analyzing Fort Sumter National Monument located in Charleston, South Carolina. This landmark is significant because it is the site where the Civil War began in 1861. The Civil War is directly connected to slavery, making Fort Sumter an important location in African American history. The conflict began when the Confederate forces attacked Union soldiers stationed at the fort. This has marked the start of a war that would determine the future of slavery in the United States. Southern states had separated from the Union mainly because they wanted to preserve slavery. Fort Sumter connects to African American history because the outcome of the Civil War led to the end of slavery. The Union victory resulted in the Emancipation Proclamation and later the 13th Amendment, which officially abolished slavery. After the war, the Reconstruction era began. This is a time when the United States tried to rebuild and give rights to formerly enslaved people. Although African Americans gained freedom, they still faced discrimination and challenges. However, this period also led to the creation of schools and institutions that helped African Americans move forward. Fort Sumter represents a major turning point in American history. It marks the moment when the country faced the issue of slavery through war and began the process of change. In conclusion, Fort Sumter is a key historical landmark because it represents the beginning of the Civil War and the eventual end of slavery. It helps us understand the importance of this period in shaping African American history.